In a YouTube video published on November 21st, 2017, Jordan Peterson, a white male psychology professor at the University of Toronto, argued for a distinction between majority privilege and white privilege. He asks, is it white privilege or is it majority privilege? And if it's majority privilege, isn't that just part of living within your culture? So let's say you live in your culture, you are privileged as a member of that culture. Well, obviously, that's what the culture is for. That's what it's for. Why would you bother building the damn thing if it didn't accrue benefits to you? Now you might say, well, one of the consequences is that it accrues fewer benefits to those who aren't in the culture. Yeah, well, you can immediately associate that with race. You can't just do that and say it's white privilege.
Peterson justifies his claim about white privilege based on the fact that a majority builds a culture that will further its own self-interest, and this furthering of the common good cannot be seen as unjust. However, Peterson is very selective in his description of white privilege. He sketches white privilege as being as trivial as the predominance of white people being on TV. Peterson misunderstands the role in which oppression supports privilege in the form of unearned advantages that constrain the ability of others to exercise capacities up to a sufficient level necessary for well-being. Privilege in the form of unearned advantages is supported by oppressive social structures that allow some groups to exercise capacities that enhance their well-being, while other groups are constrained in developing and exercising their own capacities. Iris Marion Young defines social justice as the degree to which society constrains and supports these institutional conditions necessary for a good life. The values comprised in the good life can be comprised into two very general ones. The first being developing and exercising one's capacities and expressing one's experience, and the second being participating in determining one's actions and conditions of one's actions. Certain groups experiencing oppression are constrained from the good life by unjust societal forces. Oppression consists in the institutional arrangements that impede or prevent the development and exercise of individual capabilities and expression of one's own experience.
From the perspective of individuals benefiting from unjust institutional arrangements, oppressive forces that constrain other groups are often invisible. Marilyn Frye highlights this in her birdcage analogy. In this analogy, Frye shows that with only one wire to impede an individual's progress, it is easily diverted. However, when you take a more macroscopic view of an individual situation, the ways in which systemic institutional forces interact suddenly result in multiple wires encaging the individual. Let's use an example. A white female engages in frequent sexual activity with various partners. After exercising this freedom, she then finds herself in a bind. The woman is shamed for her behavior and ostracized from her social community for her promiscuous behavior. Consequently, the woman begins to hide her sexual activity from those around her and is more likely to use dangerous contraceptives and become more susceptible to unwanted pregnancies. However, imagine another scenario. In this situation, the woman abstains completely from sexual behavior. Now, the woman is constantly pressured by men to engage in sexual activity, and if she doesn't, she may be labeled frigid and a bitch. Thus, in this scenario, she is also constrained by her sexual choices due to societal norms of how women should act. For a white male, both scenarios are significantly less damning to his personhood. A white male who engages in frequent sexual activity with various partners is often praised by his male counterparts, and is thus happy to continue exercising this freedom without fear of being shamed. Moreover, a white male who abstains from sexual activity is often referred to as soft or a pussy, both denigrating terms comparing him to a woman.
From this example, we can see that the white male has the privilege of being able to exercise his freedom while the white female does not. At first, this may seem like an advantage, but the difference between advantage and privilege, according to Allison Bailey, is that privilege plays a role in keeping complex systems of domination in place. These systems constrain female sexuality in unequal and unjust ways, and that they don't constrain men. Bailey lists 4 conditions that make privilege unjustifiable. First, benefits granted privilege are always unearned and conferred systematically to members of dominant social groups. First, benefits granted to the privileged are always unearned and conferred systematically to members of dominant social groups. Second, privilege granted to members of dominant groups simply because they are members of these groups is almost never justifiable. Third, most privilege is invisible to, or is not recognized as such, by those who have it. Fourth, privilege has a wild card quality that extends benefits to cover a wide variety of circumstances and conditions. Privilege perpetuates systems of domination because privilege, as Messner says, is not an individual attribute like a pair of shoes one can remove and discard. It is also built into the fabric of institutions and organizations.
So, if we ask Jordan Peterson, what holds up your privilege, it's not just the simple fact that he is in the majority. He has certain characteristics that confer unjustifiable, unearned advantages and lacks other characteristics that would constrain him. Privilege is supported by oppressive social structures, and that is the most important thing for all of us, including Jordan Peterson, to realize.